My name is Ryan Paul. I teach history here on campus, and I am the director of A.P.E.X. On behalf of myself and the A.P.E.X team, Sophie Javage and Evan Miller, I want to welcome you all to Bout It, the political power of just being. I'd also like to thank those at the Eccles Foundation, the Grace A. Tanner Center for Human Values, Art Insights, the Southern Utah Museum of Art, and the Provost's Office for making this event possible. I'd like to remind you that today's conversation will continue this afternoon at 3 p.m. on Thunder 91.1 and on the A.P.E.X Radio Hour podcast. This year's Grace A. Tanner visiting artist, Vitus Shell, is a painter specializing in mixed media collages, and he was born and currently resides in Monroe, Louisiana. And I know I pronounced that incorrectly, because I'm not from Monroe. He focuses his artistic efforts on capturing the Black experience by utilizing impactful imagery that deconstructs samples and remixes identity, civil rights, and contemporary Black culture. Shell earned a BFA from Memphis College of Art in 2000 and an MFA from the University of Mississippi in 2008. Also my alma mater, hotty toddy, to all you Ole Miss out there. Throughout his career, Shell has been fortunate to have residencies at several prestigious institutions, including Bemis Center for Contemporary Arts, Anderson Ranch Art Center, Hermitage Artist Retreat, MoCA, Joan Mitchell Center, Skowhegan School of Art, and the Masur Museum of Art. His accomplishments are many, including exhibiting his work at various universities, museums, and private galleries across the United States, such as the McKenna Museum of African American Art, Stephen F. Austin University, Miami University, and Oxford, Ohio. Additionally, he has created murals for the National Civil Rights Museum in Memphis, NBA Pioneers Exhibit, the Indianola City Pool in Indianola, Mississippi, Union Parish Elementary School in Farmerville, Louisiana, and has even been commissioned by the Memphis UrbanArt Commission for public art. Shell is the recipient of several grants, including the Joan Mitchell MFA Award, and as of 2020, he holds the position of visiting assistant professor at Louisiana Tech University. We do have copies of Bout It, the exhibit retrospective of his work, for sale in the lobby after our question and answer session and his presentation. Vitus will host a book signing out there if you're interested. It is now my extreme pleasure to welcome Vitus Shell to Southern Utah University and to the A.P.E.X stage.
All right. So my presentation is about Bout It, the show, the exhibition that I created new work for. While Black was a hashtag in 2018, while it was a new thing then, it had always been something that Black folks dealt with, microaggressions, being in different spaces. This was an encounter called Camera, guy playing basketball in a gym. Apparently he fouled a person, and the person called the police on him. So the police had to come out over a basketball game. This lady called the police on a little boy selling water. She became, I think, Water Becky or something like that. These guys were hanging out, waiting for a friend, and a white friend, at a Starbucks in Philadelphia, and the police were called on them because they wouldn't leave, and they had no reason to leave. While all of these encounters are not always physically harmful. They are mentally harmful to people, especially to Black folks. I think to all of us as a whole, but we don't always associate harm done to certain people as a part of harm that's done to us. This was the original Becky. She called police on a Black family hanging out in barbecuing in an Oakland park, and social media, of course, came and made a big deal out of it, and I think embarrassed her to a good point. But the powerful thing about this encounter with her was that the next day, the whole Black community in Oakland came out and celebrated and partied in that same park that that family was the police was called on that family. So in that, it was to me it was an act of resistance, being able to fight without physically fighting the situation, partying, also being an act of resistance. So in that, I started thinking about this work that I was making and how the people you see here are people that I do a call for models, and they come out and model for my work. And in the photo shoots, the models just get to really do what they want to do, be who they want to be. And over time, of course, their personalities come out. Sometimes you get somebody like the guy on the far right who was real nervous, but eventually we really got something good out of his pose. And the guy in the center who had some modeling experience, he was on point the whole time. More of the models, and the reason I'm showing these is because you'll see how some of these photos that didn't make it and why the other photos made it. And you'll also see that some of the changes I kind of made that I felt was right for the for the paintings. So in 2019, I began working on the work for this show. This was me at Anderson Ranch in Snowmass, Colorado, working in my studio. You could see the collaging work, and the collaging work came from me wanting to make in my work, continuing to want to make connections between the old and the new. And then the old, I thought about rural wallpaper, and when people couldn't afford wallpaper, they would just put newsprint up. A lot of people in the South can relate to it because their parents or grandparents had homes like this. And this is more of the imagery from examples that I found online. And the connection between the new is how graffiti artists use the paste-ups to quickly do graffiti in a way that's I guess it's a sign of resistance also, right? And I wanted to make that connection between the old and the new with the work with that. So in the work that I started creating, as you can see here, this was a piece called Karma. And I wanted to make work that kind of connected to medieval art and position my pieces in a long conversation about portraiture and who was considered, who was deemed important enough to be painted and be presented in this type of way. So here you can see the mandalas that my oval shapes kind of mimic from the medieval period. And even in the canvases, you can see here how the shape is kind of used, and even in the unstretched canvas that's put on top, the faux frames that I use to kind of mimic the whole medieval framing idea. It's all canvas. It's a bunch of collage of canvas on top of canvas. The canvas isn't perfect. That mimicking, that's just coming on the long history of portraiture and how it's not perfect also. Oh, and here, if you see those little 4 drawings on the canvas to the bottom, those are drawings from my kids that I collage into my pieces at times. So more of the oval shape pieces, the white motifs that you see on the canvases are my foam cut prints. It was something that I picked up in grad school, and I used that to kind of create a graphic element in my work. It helps to create depth in the work. Also, I'm always thinking about foreground, middle ground, and the background. I think this the thing that to me that's interesting about the work is the abstractness that you can see in the pieces, the models, their pride, that charisma that unspoken charisma, them just being, and that was the point of me making the work. You can see here, this is an example of the model, the photograph from the photograph of the model versus the painting of the model. Another example of the photograph versus the model, and me using me adding things because I felt it added a little bit more color to the painting. More of the icons used in medieval art. Just want to make that connection between the two, and also the connection between like how gold is being used for a long time in a lot of communities outside of medieval art. But medieval art always getting that attention, but it's not a new thing to most cultures. And this is a guy from earlier that was a little nervous. And as you can see, the framing is not perfect. It's falling off the canvas, and that's on purpose. As a Louisiana kid growing up, listening to music, I think the age of the bling bling era definitely shows up in the work. If you don't know, Cash Money was a part of the whole hip hop scene, and it was always about bragging about what they had, the big chains, the big rings, the gold teeth. And for me, outside of just Cash Money, like that was something that was just normal within the community. And I always thought to see things that go from a community to a bigger platform is always interesting. So the gold teeth and all that stuff was always normal. More the framing, the faux framing, the figure. This is a guy that had modeling experience. Things that we don't normally think about. Who also could participate in being photographed. Everybody couldn't afford photographs, and that whole thing of owning photos and these nice frames and stuff like that. I wanted to just show examples of things that I was looking at when I was making the work. This piece right here was called Hood Rich. And around the images, around the painting is, it says womanhood, motherhood, sisterhood, and it says, and Hood Rich at the bottom. So I wanted to, Hood Rich was another one of the Cash Money records that they put out, and I wanted to play around with that idea by giving my model a chance to just be without any pressure of anything else. This piece right here is I think is one of the more interesting pieces to see in person, because when you look at it at an angle, the framing is falling off. Even at the bottom, the framing is kind of leaning off the painting. It's and it's, again, it's just about, for me, connected to that unperfect history of portraiture. This is Klimt's Woman in Gold piece. I've always been interested in his work, but I didn't know how it would show up in my work. And it wasn't intentional, but this piece came. The difference in this piece and Klimt's piece is probably, I think it's about 36 by 36, so it's a pretty small piece. This piece is about 6 by 10 feet. These guys were the finishing of that body of work. Initially, I didn't feel like the work was complete. So I reached out to the curator at the museum and asked, could we do another photo shoot? So we did another photo shoot at a place, at the MLK Center in Lafayette, which is the hood, right? But nobody came out to the photo shoot but a bunch of little kids. And the kids were good and fun to play with, and they took pictures with my camera, but they didn't fit what I was looking for. I wanted models that felt a little bit more like community oriented, similar to thinking about hip hop music. So we were getting ready to leave, and it was a group of guys just in the parking lot recording a rap video. And it had to be God, right? Because I was like, I asked Ben, I was like, you want to go over or you want me to go over and talk to him? He was like, nah, I think you should. So I went over and talked to the guys, and of course they was a little skeptical about me coming over, which they should be. They don't know who I am. But once I showed them some of the work that I was working on and that I was a professional artist, they kind of opened up, and these were the images that came out of that working with those guys, which I think really completed the work for the show. So, yeah. And that's the end of my presentation.
Thank you for this and for the few minutes we have to talk a little more about who you are and what you do. So I I'm fascinated by how we get to now, right? Like not how we get to here in this very moment, but when did you decide that this is what you want to do? Was there anything before this that you had decided to study, or when did you decide that, hey, this is not only what I want to do, but that I'm pretty good at it?
I still don't know if I'm pretty good at it. But when I was, I guess I've always drawn and did art. But when I decided to go to college, I had a few moments that helped me to say this is exactly what I want to do. Originally, when I got to college, I thought I would be an illustrator for comic books. But when I look at my work, I always looked at my work, I don't think I have that hand to be a comic book artist. And meeting a mentor of mine, a couple mentors, they kind of opened the doors for me. And then from there, having an artist group, we formed an artist group in Memphis with artists just talking to each other, being able to critique each other's work, being able to travel. That's when things started to come together, like this is exactly what I want to do. And also, I think with being in a group, you also have like a network. You start, their network becomes your network, and then you start to grow like what you can do. Sometimes I'm introducing them to a person. Sometimes they would introduce me to somebody. So that made it a lot easier traveling on a budget. You know, you got 5 people, $25, $50. You know, you can travel and, you know, do what you need to do. Maybe not so much now, but yeah, then.
So in our conversations, as we've talked, mentorship has been a big part of your life. You've talked about how you were I think, in fact, you just referenced it must have been God, right? That these guys were recording a rap video. But in your story, there's lots of these, I don't know if you'd call them divine, but tender mercies or things that kind of come in where you meet people. Can you talk about the role of mentorship in your life and then how you've paid that back?
Yeah. So, I don't know how to explain it, but things just kind of happen. So when I was in undergrad, I had the dean of my school was a black guy named Alonzo Davis. Alonzo was originally from Alabama, had moved to California, had opened the first black gallery that showed Kerry James Marshall, Elizabeth Catlett, and a lot of like big name artists that later became famous. At the time when he had the space, of course, the market wasn't as open. So at the time, I didn't know all of this stuff about him while we were at school or whatever. But I did know that he would always stop and have conversations with me. So one day he stopped me and he told me that an artist had just moved to town and that she was looking for some help to work on her figurine collection. And I was like, yeah, this is cool. I didn't know what was going to pan out of it. I think I was thinking about just making a couple dollars. You know, as a student, you're trying to figure out how to pay some bills or feed yourself. And what happened was that relationship turned to all kinds of things. It turned to me being able to travel. It also turned to their network becoming part of my network, me getting the inner workings of how an artist worked, and her husband who did the business, how that art business kind of worked. So I think for me, I always think from what they did for me, they would feed me from time to time. So they would call me and be like, yo, we gonna cook today. You wanna come by? Just come. So I think just that them being genuine and I guess giving it just made me understand that I also had to do that for the next person. So anytime I'm in a situation, a young artist, a peer, whoever, and they needed something from me, I try to make myself available to a certain degree. And you don't want to. I try not to overextend myself because I already got a lot of stuff going on. But I do try to give them as much as I can, and then put the ball in their court. So I think that's what happened for me. They gave me as much as they could give, and then let it go.
And you were on this kind of cusp when you talk about being a professional artist. You still then have come back to be a teacher. Mm-hmm. Right, and I think that's something that you mentioned, that's still a really important part of who you are as an artist and as an individual. So can you talk about, you came back to your hometown, right? You could have gone and done other things, and you still do, but you've come back to your fairly small Louisiana town, and what are you doing there now? We've talked a little bit about it, but...
I've been back in Louisiana since 2008, which it really feels like I've only been there 4 years, but time moves really fast. But I think over time I've done like the residencies, and that's what cut into it. But right now, we started a nonprofit for Black creatives in North Louisiana, and it's important because in North Louisiana, it's heavily Black populated, but the reflection of that doesn't show up in the arts. It doesn't show up in any kind of, even in business or things like that. So for me, I know that people have to be creative in order to fix situations, right? And if an area is being deprived of that creativity, I think that's how you continue to control that population. So in my eyes, I wanted to, because I've been allowed to come into certain rooms, I've been allowed to do certain things. I wanted to create a platform so other creative Black folks could come and also stand on the platform and say what they needed or figure out what they could do to bring change in the area. So the Black Creative Circle, we originally started meeting in 2018, and we officially started our nonprofit status in August of last year, and we're still working on getting all our paperwork done for that.
And what type of creative folks? Is it all kind of visual arts, or what else are you doing?
Yeah, so the Black Creative Circle is not just about visual artists. It's about culinary artists. It's about literary artists and performing artists. And for me, being one of the few artists from North Louisiana that go down south into South Louisiana and actually exhibit and do things, and people always asking what y'all got going on in North Louisiana, I knew that we had to do something. So the ideal of if you see a problem, you fix a problem, I wanted to be that, try to help with that, fixing that problem. People not respecting North Louisiana the same way, people feel about South Louisiana. And South Louisiana is known for culture, the food, and the people, and all of those things. And I wanted to be a part of that trying to help fix that.
Yeah, two observations. First is you're one of the few Southerners I know who say that time actually moves fast in the South. Mm. And secondly, I think it's interesting that you talk about North Louisiana and South Louisiana, because in our state, we also refer to North and South, right? There's Northern Utah, where the majority of the population is, and of course Southern Utah, where the majority of the culture and intelligence and emotional maturity, where all that exists, right? Mm-hmm. But I think that place is really important in my work as a historian, but place is also very important in your work and in your life. Can you talk about some of these differences? You talk about North Louisiana versus South Louisiana, and many of us just kind of understand Louisiana as being
Right.
New Orleans.
Right. Everybody does. And so people from New Orleans say it's North Louisiana, South Louisiana, and then there's New Orleans. So I'm in a fight. I'm in that fight to make North Louisiana important. So in North Louisiana is also part of the Bible Belt. South Louisiana is part of it's Catholic country. So it's real Catholic. A lot of French influence things. North Louisiana, they say at times, and I get mad about this, but they say we might as well be from Arkansas because we so north. And I feel like I'm a Louisiana boy all day. So, and I'm not gonna let y'all take that from me. So yeah, that's the difference between it. And then so the history of North Louisiana is cotton, agriculture, and things of that nature. And I feel like at times that's what controls, that's the mentality that people bring to politics, to business, to education, trying to control communities similar to that time period when people were picking cotton or sharecropping after slavery ended. So I think I'm in a fight to kind of like try to fix that, like get black folks to see themselves as the person to fix the problem, and whatever problem it is, if it's a neighborhood problem, if it's a personal career thing that they're going through, or whatever it is. And I feel like a lot of times in North Louisiana, because of that whole history, it prohibits the area from growing. And it's a lot of money in North Louisiana, but it's like old money, and it's tied up in land and all of that stuff.
So I'm fascinated by this idea of music and visual culture, right? How you've really used music to influence what you do. Mm-hmm. Can you talk a little more about how that, has music always been a part of your life? Yeah. Has art always been a part of your life, or do they come separately?
I think, so when I think back about it, I do remember being real young, 3 years old, like drawing, like everybody, on anything. So I would draw on napkins, and I remember drawing like these houses with trees around them, and the trees have like, supposed to be a fruit tree, but I might put a watermelon in the tree, and I just didn't know what was in the trees. But and then for music, I do remember my mom used to have records, and she would have friends come over, and but at that time, hip hop was just becoming like the big thing. But she had the Commodores and Prince and Mike and Sheila E. and she had those type of records. When I would go and try to DJ, throwing records on and stuff, and even messing up the needles on her records. But I was also interested in what was going on with hip hop, with the Fat Boys and Run DMC and Curtis Blow, and Kool Moe Dee and all those guys. So I was when hip hop first came in, I was young, but I had always had an interest in it. And the older I got, the more I guess I was drawn into it. Growing up in a certain community, you're gonna hear the music all the time, and then you would hear friends talk about like, "Oh, did you hear so and so record?" And you're like, "Nah, I didn't, cause I couldn't afford to go buy the record." So, and I didn't have like a big brother that played, that could afford it and play it. So, you would figure out a way to kind of find the music, and I didn't. And then like, in the 90s, Rap City became like real popular, and I used to always remember watching Rap City and writing down all of the rappers' names. So I would have like pages on top of pages of just the artists' names and stuff like that, collected. And I guess not knowing that how this was gonna influence my artwork later. For another time period, I used to manage some rappers in Louisiana. And at one time, I always felt that the two had to be separate, right? That my music people wouldn't respect the art thing, and the art people wouldn't respect the music thing. So eventually, as you know, you see like different trends going on in the art world and people doing things, mixing the two, I started feeling more confident and really pushing forward with the music stuff in my art.
Do you listen to music while you're
Yeah.
creating your art, or does that influence what you're actually putting on the canvas? I mean, I guess what I'm really asking is the process of saying, here's what I want this to look like, or here's this unfinished canvas. I'm going to put on some music. I have a rough idea, and I'm going to go at it.
No, I don't normally work like that. Music becomes like just a soundtrack in the studio. But a lot of times when I'm listening to music, I might hear something in a song, and I'm like, yo, I need to write that down and kind of revisit that later. That's what music does for me. It's not like I don't work like an abstract expressionist would, or listening to jazz. You know, the music get a little rough here, and they want to add a lot of pain in this area, and then it's a little softer here. That's not how my work works. So I'm usually like, when I'm painting, I'm kind of like got an idea. This is the model. I'm painting the model, and this is my background, and I'm figuring out like all of the compositional things.
So you've talked and you've shown some of your musical influences, but if you look back, you know, culturally and artistically, whose shoulders do you stand on in that way of artistic influences?
Kerry James Marshall, Barclay Hendricks, Kehinde Wiley, Micheline Thomas, Emma Amos. It's a long list of artists that I've always looked up to. Charles White, Elizabeth Caplett, and working with my mentor, those were the people that introduced those artists to me. At the time when I was in school, you didn't get a lot of the black artists, like the contemporaries. So those were people that I didn't even know existed for a long time. And then working with them, they were in the market, but not in their exact market. But at times, you know, that stuff kind of overlaps with her doing figurines and her drawing her pastel drawings. But at times, they introduced me to a bunch of artists that I didn't even know. So so I stand on the back of all of those artists. Selma Lewis. You know, I can just keep going on and on. It's a lot of artists that I think should be being celebrated. And what I am interested in is that, and what I'm excited about is that more of those artists are starting to be celebrated, starting to be canonized by books and documentaries and things of that nature. So.
Ending up in art history classes,
right,
and more than they have.
And
in the
I
past.
also share my own personal list. I'm like, yo, you need some. If you need some black artists, here's a list of black artists. But it's so many of us that's doing it. Some people are regional. Some people are international. But I think I feel like at times I'm a regional artist. And I guess things are starting to open up as far as that. But and when you talk to people in the art field, they talk about how to find artists and stuff like that. And I'm like, that doesn't work for people that are doing things in certain places. Like, you're not traveling to North Louisiana, or you're not traveling to Utah to meet artists. You know, so when I hear them say that, I don't know. I feel some type of way about it, but and then I look at the long history of who is important and who not important, and I feel like that's just a carried on tradition. Like it's something that needs to be. We keep talking about moving forward and doing something different, but in times when you talk to curators, they're kind of doing the same thing that's been done.
I think it's interesting, and I was fascinated by your comment in your presentation about, and I had never thought about this as deeply enough, but we talk about photographs. You showed those images of Lincoln and a couple other folks of photographs, and this idea of who gets to be remembered, right? Because in the early days of photography, we chose people. Portraiture was of people who of note, right? Or family members, and we've probably all been in a situation where we find a box of old photographs and have literally no idea who these people are, right? Only that their either faces are blurred or they don't look happy. So I think it's interesting that this notion of how we decide who gets to be remembered, because in history, if you're not remembered in some ways, you don't exist, right? And so I think it ties into this idea of the subtitle. And by the way, this is Bout It. This is the retrospective that's available if you get a chance out in the lobby. But the subtitle is The Political Power of Just Being. And we've talked about this idea that to give African Americans the ability just to exist, right? Just to exist. And you referenced that in the beginning of your presentation. But could you talk more about this idea of what you mean by giving the political power of just being and what it means in your mind just to exist?
Okay. When you think about the whole Wild Black kind of hashtag and that movement to kind of like point out black folks just hanging out in the park and the police being called on them. For me, being able to just exist in the same way that other communities exist was also, to me, a political thing. It's a resistance just to just exist, because a lot of times in politics, and I talk about Chicago. When we think about Chicago, we think about one of America's extremes, right? Chicago isn't every city in the country, but Chicago is always used as an example to say, oh, this is how we should police the bodies of black folks. And the policing the bodies of black folks has a long history in this country. And then the microaggressions that happen within organizations, within day-to-day interactions. Sometimes they're documented, sometimes they're not. For me, just the ideal of just being able to be is a political act, of just being able to be in a painting, to be photographed, to go eat, not be bothered, to live in a community with nobody coming over to check why you live here, or if you live here, or what's that smell because you're barbecuing. Like, these things are things that black folks have always had to deal with. And for me, I wanted to create a body of work where black folks could simply just be in that. And even in that, it still says something about society, right? That it becomes a political act for black folks just to exist without nothing being attached to it.
And I think you see that if you look through many of the images in the book and that you show, it's I appreciate the idea of political act because it's almost a defiance.
Right, it's definitely a defiance.
Right, just my being here is a political act of resistance, of defiance, for a variety of reasons.
Right.
I mean, I think it's brilliantly illustrated here.
Thank you.
So we're running out of time, but I have one last question that I always ask, and I will ask you this again on the radio, and I'm telling you the answer needs to be different.
Okay.
I'm asking you to have the answer be different.
I mean, you've been feeding me since I've been here, so I kind of like
Yes.
got to go with
That. That was the qualification when they asked me to do this job. Is they said, "Well, you obviously have a bigger belly, so you know how to feed people. So be sure that happens." So this is the last question, and I find that I ask this question a lot. But Vitus Shell, what are you currently watching, reading, or listening to that is bringing you joy?
I don't know. I don't know. I never figured that out. I could just tell you what I'm watching right now. I've been watching the Wu-Tang Saga, which is on Hulu. It's been interesting being a Southerner, one of the few Southerners that I knew that was also a Wu-Tang fan, because, it's a whole thing. Southerners, we listen to the Southern rap, we listen to UGK and Outkast and all of that stuff. But, it's been interesting to see their path and how, a lot of times you think things are perfect, and to see that it's not perfect, it just happened. And they're just doing, and they figuring it out as they go. And I think that kind of, for me, helps me to navigate the world in a certain way. Like, I don't have to know the exactly everything that I'm doing. I could just continue to figure it out as I move through the world. So I don't know if it's making me happy. I don't know. It kind of gives me anxiety. But yeah, I think that's the thing I'm watching right now. Music-wise, what I'm listening to, I'm always listening to different music. Like every week a new album come out. I haven't been able to sit with an album, I guess, longer than Nas's last album. Nas, and I did listen to Kendrick's album for a couple weeks too, but it's like hard to listen to an album that long. Yeah, nowadays.
Well, thank you very much for being here. Thank you for coming to Cedar City and Southern University. Please give Vitus Shell a round of applause. And if you're interested in chatting more with him or taking a look at Bout It, the political power of just being, we'll be just outside. Thank you all for coming, and have a great day. Thanks.